I'd like to transfer my convoluted 2-router Homelab dial-up setup from these 2 Cisco machines over to an equally convoluted setup, but this time it'll be in a single unit I can conveniently rack up. We'll get this early 2000s Cisco 3725 setup as an all-in-one Homelab dial-up ISP box. The setup will require using an RJ21 cable and breakout panel, and some interesting modules, including this 8-port analog modem card. We'll have a look inside the thing, get it all configured in iOS, the software that runs on these Cisco routers, and unwrap a new in-box late 90s Microcom modem to do some testing. Let's get into it. This is a Cisco 3725 router I recently picked up, and it caught my eye for a couple reasons. First was this NEC badging next to the Cisco logo, and it looks like it maybe came from the factory. I mean, it's obviously stuck on there, like I could probably pry it off, but it looks nice, it looks natural with the color of the unit. It's not as nice as the printing here, but it seems like it was produced this way. NEC, of course, is a 100-plus-year-old Japanese electronics company. They were a massive PC manufacturer back in the 90s. And over here, we see an NEC logo with like the iOS version, the software that runs on these routers. 12.3 IP base is the version and like kind of the feature set that this might have shipped with from the factory. So that's kind of interesting. Maybe NEC collaborated outside of the US with Cisco to distribute these or something. I can't really find anything about it. And the other saucy thing that caught my eye in the eBay listing is this very interesting network module it's got installed. That is Token Ring. Token Ring was an Ethernet competitor that came out in the 80s. It's from IBM, and I've been slowly acquiring over the past 2 years a bunch of Token Ring gear to create some videos about Token Ring networks. And I think I almost have what I need after some eBay stuff arrives, and it'll be nice to have this as a backup in case I need it. So don't forget to subscribe if you want to see some of this Token Ring stuff. But that's not why we're here today. I want to turn this 3725 into a dial-up ISP in a box for what I'm calling the retro rack. That's a rack I've got in the other room that I'm racking up with old enterprise gear and Cisco and other networking stuff. And this thing is going to serve as a dial-up router and ISP, basically. I actually have an existing setup. I have 2 other videos where I went over this, but I have to use 2 routers to make this happen today. A 2600 with the modems in it, and then a 2911 sort of acting as a telecom provider for the phone lines. And I think that thing is just like way too new for a dial-up setup. This baby came out in 2002, and I've actually got its big brother, the 3745, same series. This is just a 4U unit. And I had originally thought I was going to turn this into the all-in-one or whatever, but I kind of like the smaller form factor, and from a practical standpoint, it came with rack ears. This 3700 series came out in the early 2000s, and it's what Cisco called a branch router, basically routing for small to medium businesses. And it's sort of interesting, the smaller one was more expensive. In 2002, this would have set you back $12,000 US, and this one would have set you back $8,500 US. So together we've got $20,500 sitting on the desk, which is like $36,000 US today. Cheap by Cisco standards back then, which is horrifying. I haven't done any research into why this one is theoretically cheaper, even though, let's flip them around, it's got way more space, obviously. It's got 4 of these big expansion ports, and I was going to say the I/O board, which is actually removable, where you control it over the serial console and administer it. It comes with 2 fast Ethernet ports, a compact flash card, and 3 WIC slots. But I was kind of looking at the smaller one. It also comes with all that. It's got 2 fast Ethernet, compact flash, and then 3 WICs. So what takes a whole massive slot up here has been condensed here. That's sort of interesting. I should probably explain what WIC means. It stands for WAN interface card. So in those tiny slots, you can put things like a T1 card, this is an ADSL card, or in our case, analog telephone modem cards. So all you're losing out on with the smaller model is one of these big guys. And my assumption is that this one's just more capable, given the price difference. Let's get this out of the way, and I'll show you some interesting modules I'd like to put in here and build up an ISP for that retro rack. In my original setup, I'm relying on these voice interface cards. This is an FXS card, or foreign exchange station, sometimes called foreign exchange subscriber. Basically, these can behave, or you can configure them to behave as a telecom. So I can get dial tone out of this. I can plug in a phone to this one, configure this thing that when I call this port, ring this one. And then I was coupling that with some modems in another router. So this is a one-port modem, just like you may have had externally or internally back in the day. So the basic idea is you can have a modem on a computer, in this room. It's connected up to one of these guys, providing dial tone. I can dial. It in turn will dial the modem on the router, which can establish a connection between these two modems and give me dial-up internet access right down here in my basement. The problem, at least in this 3700 series, is I can't just slap these voice cards in here. It requires additional modules that take up one of these, and on certain routers you need other things called PVDMs. Computers were a mistake. But I believe in this 3700 series I have found the perfect combination to leverage some very interesting cards. The first is this 8AM card. This is 8 analog modems on these larger form factor modules. It's also just a stunning looking card. It's amazing. And it represents 8 of these that I'm currently using, or 8 internal modems or 8 external modems. You get the idea. This 8AM was very generously donated by a viewer named David, and I am very excited and hopeful that we can get it working. Sometimes mixing and matching these modules into routers doesn't always go the way you think, but I'm gonna do my best here. That's the modems out of the way, so we can get 8 of them out of this one card, but we still need phone line. I'm doing that with this FXS card today, and I'm gonna switch over to this bad boy. This is a high density analog network module. So out of this one cable, this is an RJ21, we will definitely talk about that a little more. A theoretical 25 lines can come out, and you can see here, out of the factory, this thing comes equipped as a 4-line FXS. So at the moment, it's the equivalent of my little 4-port guy here. But as you can see, there is space to denote additional capabilities on this little badge area. On the board itself, it's clear that you can put daughter boards on in these connectors to add additional phone lines over the same big-ass cable. I'll admit they don't appear to be readily available on eBay, at least at the moment, but I'll hunt down some more, and I'm excited that I'll be able to expand this over time with more and more phone lines to mess around with. That's all well and good, but we need to connect whatever's going on with this monster up to at least one of these analog telephone ports, and get some computers involved as well. And that's where I'm happy to report we're going to start getting a little bit Homelab-y with this thing. I picked this thing up on eBay months ago, and it has been burning a hole in my brain. I need to use this thing. It's some sort of RJ21, that's this connector style here, that is also on the back of our module here. Breakout to phone line ports. These are RJ11. I always forget that. So yeah, you can plug your phones into those. I think hopefully you see where I'm going. Hopefully this makes sense. This one's sort of interesting. It's got 25 total, which one of these cables can carry. This thing has 2 inputs, and each one is labeled, with 2 numbers. That one's 46 and 21. So maybe you'd have 5 coming in on blue and the others on red. I'm not really sure what that setup would be. If you've used one of these professionally in the field, let me know why you'd want 2 coming into just 25 jacks. At any rate, you get yourself one of these bad boys. RJ21 cable goes right in there. The other end's going to go in here, and we can plug phones and modems and whatever else we want into this big breakout panel. This one happens to be an Allen Teleproducts unit from Henderson, Nevada. I'm guessing just by the feel of it, probably from the 80s. And then over here, Velcro's kind of in the way, but there's the RJ21 port. It's kind of convoluted, but that's kind of how I like things, and that's what Homelabbing is all about, just messing around. We can get 4 phone lines out of this bad boy at the moment, and we can break them out into phone cables, and then we'll have to go right back in to our modems over here, and then we'll get some computers and everything else, and we'll run some lines together, and we'll walk through the physical aspect after we see what's going on with this thing. All I've done is power this on once and factory reset it so it doesn't have a password anymore. Let's boot it up together, and we'll make sure the token ring card is healthy. Can't remember if I paid attention to that last time. I powered it up, and we'll go from there. Power's hooked up, and then we will need a serial console cable to administer this thing over, at least for now. It's not the quietest thing in the world. Let's give it power. So this is noise canceled at the moment. It's not terrible. It's not terrible, but let me show you these fans. This will be without noise canceling. They're kind of crunchy. I think the bearings are just a little crusty. It's amazing. The big one right here has this same exact affliction, so I don't know if it was the fans they were using in this series or what. We'll try to address that with some oil. Here we are on the serial console. It's come up. There's no enable password. Enable just gets you into privilege mode so you can configure the router to your heart's content. And we'll do a show version. And it looks like we are running Enterprise Base. So that's going to be just like the basic feature set, I think. 12.4 from sometime in 2010. I think I saw this unit was built in 2004, though the 3700 series came out in 2002. Had at least 6 years under its belt, probably longer. And then we'll do a show diag. And this just shows you all the hardware it thinks it knows about. Here is the main motherboard, where those 3 WIC ports and the 2 fast Ethernet ports were, I was showing you. It knows about this NM1FE 1R2W. I believe that is the token ring card. And if I ask for all its known interfaces, we see token ring. I have never seen that on a Cisco router before. That is pretty exciting to me. Let's power this thing down. See what we can do about those fans. Poke around inside. Maybe there's something interesting in there. And then continue with the dial-up stuff. The more this thing is ran, the better those fans sound. But we'll see if we can help them out a little bit. There are screws across the top, which usually in the Cisco world means there are user serviceable parts in here. I'm guessing it's just RAM, but we will see. I can't get the lid off, and even though it doesn't look like it at first glance, because this lid is like a separate part than the side, I think I might have to take the rack ears off, which is annoying. Pretty typical though. I don't know, we'll see. I think it's this blinking plate here. It says loosen screw to remove cover. And I think this is holding the cover on somehow, which is odd. What the? Okay, I see. What the heck? Yeah, okay. Loose now. With that removed, it tips up. Does it come off? Yep, slides to the right. Excellent. Look at that, what a trick. This is not a usable module, at least not at the moment. You'd have to have it back into one of these, so I guess you only have this one and this one. Okay, but there is some daughter boarding action going on over here. We have got clearly what are some daughter board connectors here. I'm not sure, haven't looked up what those might be for. And we got some RAM over here probably. I'm not going to pull them, we'll just see what it reports later. I didn't pay attention earlier. Hidden over here is a 32 megabyte Cisco Systems branded compact flash cart. So that's how I've been saving the config. I mean, I only factory reset it, I haven't done anything else, but that's where it's going, obviously, because there is that slot on the back that I'm not using. And I find this sort of odd. Got this IEC connector here to like chain power supplies or something. There's like a insert for a card edge here as well. Maybe they can talk to one another. You can chain these together or something. That's kind of weird. At any rate, I'm getting distracted. Let's see how hard it is to take these fans out. They are quite thin. Barely an inch. You're not going to be able to tell, but I think it's mostly that one. They both are a little gritty. Some dirt or something, or the grease inside the bearings has dried up a little bit. And I think the right one is worse. It's audible enough to me, at least, you know, here, probably not over video, that I think it's going to be worth it. So basically what we're doing is going to cut a little hole in these stickers here and get some grease down in there. Oil, I should say. Got an X-Acto knife here. And if you push down with your finger, you can kind of feel where you should cut. It's usually a circle. And all it's going to do is expose the bearing just a little bit. There we go. There it is. There's the bearing down in there. And either some grease in the bearing itself has dried up, or some dirt, you know, little dust specks got in there, or both. And we should be able to fix it up. The other one here, you don't really have to be super precise on this part. Just, you know, don't make a huge mess. Got this 3-in-1 oil, and it really doesn't take much. I'm gonna, that's like way too much. I'm gonna drop a couple drops in there, and what I'll do is I'll manually see if they're better. And it doesn't sound much better, but I'm gonna do this a little bit, see where we get. Decided to put a bunch more in because this one on the left seems to be more than happy to accept it. Spun those around for a while, kept giving them oil, and then I cleaned up the excess with isopropyl alcohol. And the next step is you use something called Kapton tape and cover it up. So let's get a couple pieces rolling here. I think these scissors might be done for. They are having trouble cutting this very easy to cut tape. So we'll get that on there. And that's going to prevent the oil I just put in there from getting out, theoretically. Though it is very clear I did not clean this good enough because it's falling right back off and I can see more oil. So I'm going to clean this again. This doesn't always work, but I have had really good success in the past. And the worst case scenario is that it, just doesn't really change at all, which is no big deal. And some of you are probably laughing. I obviously learned about this fan revival technique from Mike Tech's channel. Excellent channel. Go check it out. And there we go. Looking fresh. Those are all back in, and look at this friggin' door hinge in here. What is this for? Slides onto a post, and then into like this slot right here. What the heck? So yeah, maybe you could have 2 power supplies in here. Don't know. Let's get this thing buttoned back up. We'll plug our other cards in, pull out that token ring card, see if those fans have any improvement whatsoever. Lid's back on, but before we pull the token ring card, let's fill these blanks the eBay seller left me with, because I've got plenty of these blanking plates, and they've got these super nice captive screws. They stay with the blanking plate so you can't lose it, which is obviously a very nice feature because I would lose it immediately. Get this one filled in as well. Okay, let's pull this token ring card. Maybe have a quick look at it. There it is. I am not seeing anything IBM branded. We see Infineon. What's this one here? Flip it around. Exalinks Spartan. I don't even know if that has anything to do with the token ring. I've got some of these token ring port adapters from the Cisco 7200 series of routers, which predate these guys, and on there, an IBM chip per token ring port. Different times, I guess. I think we'll put the analog port with the big RJ21 in the bottom slot here. Then we'll pull this blinking off. Kind of salty about my useless slot over here. Maybe we will have to switch to that larger 3745 someday. It's just a blinking tray. And the only thing I actually want to see working today, the 8 AM, 8 analog modems in one card. I think you'll agree, this is a beautiful sight. 8 analog modems, 4 or more, 4 at the moment. Phone lines. Let's power this thing up. I am fully expecting one or both of these not to be compatible with the iOS version that's installed, so we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Let's power this thing up. I think you know the drill. On the console port here, so we can see what the router's up to. Power's in. Let's turn it on. I would say the fans are slightly better. I don't think you're going to be able to tell. They're a little less crunchy. I'm happy with that. That's great. I'm not going to be hanging out with this thing anyway when it's on. It'll be in the other room on a rack, but yeah, that's nice to make these fans a little better. The moment of truth is when iOS boots up. Are we going to get any sort of action? I see an enable light down here. Ooh, this is really good news. Enable light is on. That means, yeah, both of them. That means it at least recognizes them. We might not be able to use them. Let's see. It booted up and it's complaining about its old token ring configuration that it doesn't understand anymore. That's fine. We'll clear that out. Let's do a show diag, I think is what we want. Okay, it's got an unknown port adapter in slot A. This is the FXS card. Okay, the NMHDA4FXS. It does not understand this one. That might be okay. It should be compatible. And if we keep going, it knows about the analog modem port adapter. Look at that, 8 ports. This particular version of iOS is evidently fully compatible. It knows it's an NM8AM. This is very exciting for me. That means that this router is indeed compatible. It wasn't exactly clear. So in the sheet that goes over everything these 3700 routers can support, this 8 modem card is there, but it doesn't specifically mention 3700. So I was a little bit nervous about this one. Very exciting. So I'm looking at the 3700 compatibility matrix thing, and this is the card I've got in there. And it should be compatible. It's kind of hard to tell. This website got kind of messed up. I wonder if I can fix that. I fixed it in the dev console. On the 3725, it says all iOS versions support this module we care about, the one that says it doesn't understand. But there's a sneaky little detail. It says it requires an iOS plus feature set. Let's go back to the router. This is always the game you have to play when you get on eBay and you find a bunch of cheap modules, cheap router, you're all excited, and none of it works. Read the data sheets, and then you got to deal with this. So let's do a show version. And yeah, I'm thinking this base thing in the iOS version that we're running is not the advanced feature set. So I'm going to go hunt one of those down. Well, can you believe it? The iOS version I needed was just sitting on my desktop the whole time. I am a little nervous though. This one is 37 megabytes. And that flash cart that was inside, I think said it was 32 megabytes. So we might have to throw a bigger flash cart in the front. It's a little bit of a pain when you accidentally copy more data than you have space for. You can recover from it, but it's a little bit of a pain. So I'm going to poke around and see if I can head that off. So if we issue a dir to take a look at the files on the existing flash cart, we can see, yeah, I think that's 20-ish megabytes. So this new iOS version that supposedly I need is quite a bit larger. I could pull that flash cart entirely, but I think I'm going to try to put the 64 megabyte in the back, see where that gets us. We'll throw this 64 megabyte Cisco Systems branded compact flash in the back here, and that's what we're going to try to boot off of eventually. And look at that, the console logging has told us external compact flash inserted. The question is, how do I look at it? I'm going to guess it's slot 0. It is. And it's complaining about the formatting of this thing. Yeah, this was from a Cisco 2800 router, and I can wipe that. That's no big deal. Been a while since I've done this. I think we want to do an erase slot 0. Yeah, that looks good. It's going to be formatted. Perfect. Erasing it now. And what we'll be able to do is get a TFTP server hooked up, copy that new bin we need over to this card, and then we'll be able to inform the router to boot from that instead. In theory, we'll see. I've already got what's called a TFTP server running in my Homelab on a Proxmox VM on a big old Dell R720. And so what we're going to do is get fast Ethernet port 00 on the home network here. Let's see if we plug this in and we have activity and link light. That's good. Back on the router, I need to know the name of that Ethernet port I just plugged into. So I'll do show IP int brief. And it is, not very surprisingly, called fast Ethernet 00. So we're going to configure from terminal, and we will configure that interface. We'll give it an IP on the network. I think 200 is free. Okay, no shut to bring the interface up. And show IP int brief. We're up and up on 1.200. From this machine I'm recording on, I can now ping that router, so we are networked. Here I'm SSH'd into the VM that is hosting my TFTP server, and if we take a look, we can see that bin file that I magically found on my desktop, which is exactly what I need, hopefully, maybe, is sitting here, and it's being served back on the router. That VM I was just showing you was at .82, so for good measure, Let's make sure we can see it, and we can. And now we're going to do copy from TFTP to slot 0, where we put that larger flash cart in. And we're going to copy from my little VM. I need to go see what that file name was. It was that. We'll just call it the same file. And let's see if we can get it. I don't think we need to erase it, but it wants to, so I'll go ahead and do that. That's fine. We just did this, but whatever. Finished erasing, and now it's saying it's loading that bin over fast Ethernet 00 to slot 0. So we're copying it from that TFTP VM where I put the bin over that network cable I just plugged in into the flash card I just plugged in. So I'll be back when this is done. It's always amazing how long this takes. It's like 2 or 3 minutes later. It's not the network. I'm pretty sure it's the speed of the flash cart, like how fast it can write. But yeah, we're getting there. You can see the activity indicator on that compact flash card is just banging away. A few more minutes later and it is done. So we should be able to take a look at what's on slot 0. And we do see the new bin. And then we are going to configure from terminal. And we're going to do a boot system slot 0 and then the file name, which I have copied. Okay. And let's write that out. By that I mean write the changes I made to the configuration. And if we do a show run, I think we'll see that boot. And there it is. I believe it is going to try to boot from our new bin. Let's issue a reload, I think it is. Yep. And we'll see what we get. There it is. It's loading from the new iOS version. Booting slower than the old image. Just anecdotally, I guess. Wonder if that slot or maybe that card is slow that I put in. They seem like they're from the same vintage as the one internally, but who knows. And look at this. The 8 modem lines. 1 second. This is good though. See this FXS stuff happening? 4 voice interfaces. Excellent. Let's get in here. Do a show diag again. And check it out. What used to be an unknown port adapter is now our high density analog voice port adapter, the 4FXS. And good news, as we saw before, it still notices the 8 analog modem ports. Excellent. Okay, now let's hook some phones up to this thing and see if we can get dial tone out of that big old cable. First thing we got to plug in is this Breakout panel to this RJ21 cable, and I'm going to cut off these Velcro strips, which are just like ancient and getting in the way. I was looking at the pinout of this thing, and if I'm looking at it right, from this orientation, this is pin 1, and this is pin 26, 2, 27, 3, 28, and so on, up through 50. Just to make sure this thing actually is what I think it is, we're going to beep out some of these. So right here should be pin 1. Sure enough, beeping. And then below that is 26. Yeah. Okay. Port 126 is pins 1 and 26. That makes sense. You might use this to break out anything, really. It doesn't have to be phones. And I'm kind of curious if this one is just all connected on the same bus, so to speak. Oh, that is the other cable gender. Okay. So you could chain one in, break it out into these boxes, and move on out of this one for daisy chaining. Okay, that makes so much more sense. Well, won't need that. Now I need 2 of these. Get this plugged in right here. And, of course, the cable wants to move the other direction. There we go. Then I'll plug this phone in to the first port, and I'm hoping with minimal or no configuration, this thing will produce a dial tone, and we'll just know that it's working and we can understand which lines. I suspect it's these 4 right here, probably from right to left on the cable. And then we'll figure out how to address them. So this thing has a theoretical 25 lines coming out of it, and I need to know how to configure the software to talk to the 4 that actually exist on the card. Let's do that now. If we go and configure from terminal. This is terrible. I know what I'm doing, guys. Don't worry. I've never interacted with this card before, so I think hopefully we can do like a show something on it. See what it's up to. Show voice. Voice port configuration and stats. Show voice. show voice port. Sweet. This is good. I'm just scrolling through. So we've got 4 of these ports in total, and we can address them because they are in slot 1, card 0, and then 0 through 3 for a total of 4 ports. Makes perfect sense, right? Let me show you on the device. This is slot 1 on this particular router. It has one thing inside of it, which is this card, which the router is calling item 0. It's like a hierarchy you're moving through when you're configuring it in the software. And then at the moment, it's exposing 4 voice ports. So if I want to talk to the first one, I configure voice port 1, 0, 0. As I'm looking at this, I think it's probably just providing dial tone. So let's go check. Got the phone plugged into the first port here. And of course the RJ21 cable is plugged into the router. Let's see. Well, that was easy. Didn't do anything. Let's set up another phone. I'm getting excited. So the way I like to test this stuff is configure one of the ports so that when I call in on one phone, it calls the other, and then I know I have like a complete circuit, so to speak, and it's pretty critical the way I'm abusing these poor routers as ATAs, basically. ATAs are these little analog telephone adapters. This one's seen better days. And they usually provide a couple ports, and you can configure them in a different interface and with different settings in much the same way I'm going to configure this thing. And so basically I'm just using this thing as multiple ATAs. This isn't like how any professional would do this, but sure makes for good Homelab stuff. To make this happen, we configure something called a dial peer. So I can say dial peer voice. You have to give it an arbitrary tag. I'm going to use 100 because number this however you want. It's just a way to give them a unique identifier, and it's POTS, plain old telephone service. Now we are configuring the dial peer. We're going to say destination pattern 425.271.22.22. And then we're going to tell it what to do when someone calls that number. I believe we need something called direct inward dial, and we're going to tell it which port to call. So remember, I've got 4 ports coming out of this thing. These are their labels. When I dial this number, I want to call the second line, that older phone I just put down. And that thing is at port 101. Let's try it out. I'll also show you something I hardly ever do, so you can see how it's spitting out all these console debug lines. I actually like that when it's telling me what the router's doing, but as you can see, it can get in the way of when you're typing. So for example, if we go into the terminal, let's configure that fast Ethernet 00, and let's shut it down. I'm gonna have to do end real quick. You can see I could have been typing as this thing spits out information, and then I'm all confused and I'm putting crappy input into the router. So if you're at the serial console, it can be kind of frustrating. And when you type a command it doesn't understand, it tries to resolve it with a domain server, and I can't figure out how to cancel out of that, and I can't be bothered to Google it. So let me know in the comments if you know how to exit out of that. All we got to do is a conf t and say no logging console. Now let's bring that interface right back up. Say no shut, and you can see the lights on the interface over there are on, and we didn't get that console output. Sometimes I turn this on, sometimes I don't. It's convenient if you're cruising and you don't want all that extra output. Let's see how we do. I do have dial tone 425.271.22.22. Aha! And it rang. Okay, we're cooking. Now the way harder part. I have to go refresh my memory and look at some old configs on how to turn this into a dial-up router, which means I'll walk you through the physical configuration here. Instead of those phones, in one of these lines, we're going to plug in a computer. So we'll have like a modem on a computer hooked up, and that'll be going into one line, and I'll be able to dial this line with the computer for dial-up internet access, right? And as you just saw, I can configure this router that when I dial that line, go ahead and ring the other one, which I will in turn plug into one of my modem ports. So what's going to happen here is the computer dials, goes through all this infrastructure, dials into one of my 8 modems, and then there's a bunch of configuration we can do to get this thing to answer the call, establish the connection, and provide internet access, which will again require being on a network to actually get to the internet. So let's get all that set up. To configure this router as a dial-up ISP of sorts, local down here, it's quite a bit of configuration, and I'm not going to lie to you when I say I'm not really an expert at it. I have a video that I'll link in the description where I covered that for my current setup, and I actually put my router, Cisco router configs in this GitHub repo. I'll link to this down below, So we can go over to Cisco, Homelab dial-up. This is my existing setup. I've got the dial-up settings I needed to get things working. I'm largely just going to copy this, and I will put all the configs we produced today together in this repo as well, that you go ahead and take a look at it. I have descriptions of what I'm trying to accomplish and how you can use the configs here and links to the videos. So I'll put that down in the description. I'm going to go get all this set up, and then we're going to test it together and troubleshoot and see if we can get it working. I have just gone on a whirlwind of emotions the last hour debugging this. I was entering in that long configuration I was showing you from my GitHub page into this router, and I was getting to the part where I was going to actually configure the modem port. So here I'm configuring line 65, which happens to be the very first modem port on that 8-port card. And I got to the point where you'd start doing some modem stuff, so flow control hardware, which is something you'd want to set. And it says, this command has no effect on this line. Use AT modem commands instead. Other commands, such as the speed, do the same thing. AT commands are a command set from one of the original Hayes modems. Basically, any modem ever, essentially, can be configured with these commands. But I wouldn't expect to have to do this on a dedicated unit inside my Cisco router. I couldn't find anything online about this other than it might be a bug, and I might have to switch iOS versions. So I finally gave up and started testing. Started by pulling out Old Faithful here, the IBM ThinkPad T60 running Windows 7. Genuine copy, of course. I started by testing out the internal modem, just built into the ThinkPad here, but that didn't work, couldn't connect, and I was getting pretty nervous that it was that configuration issue where I couldn't configure the modem on the Cisco router. So I brought in the reinforcements. My huge box of PC MCIA cards. A bunch of these are dial-up modems, and I pulled out this megahertz 28.8 X-Jack connector modem. And this ThinkPad is great because it has a PC card slot in it, so I could just throw that in there. Doesn't even need drivers, and the X-Jack is excellent. No dongles to lose. Let's dial up on that number we configured earlier. Unfortunately, this one doesn't have a speaker. Maybe we'll hunt down a modem with that so we can hear those beautiful screeches. Registering on the network, and we're connected. Back on the router, if we do a show users, we can see my collab user. That's the user I actually entered in the dial-up dialog on Windows 7 over there. Is connected. We have an IP address. Excellent. Pull up a terminal window here and look at IP config. We're on the 172.16.1.4 network. That's what my Cisco configuration is. And we can ping out to the internet. We're officially online. However, I'm actually having trouble loading websites. So here's Google, which usually just more or less works. Never mind, it's working now. Okay, Google, dial-up internet on this thing. I'm under attack. This setup is working perfectly, at least at the moment. Full dial-up access over one line. We'll add more lines in the future. Well, let's get this thing racked up in the retro rack. These PC MCIA cards, at least this modem in particular, get so insanely hot. Like, it's been online for like 5 minutes, and it's almost too hot to touch. Pretty nuts. This is what I'm calling the retro rack in here. And at the top, you can see I've got some power distribution and some networking, some Sun machines. Towards the bottom, more Sun machines and some IBM P5 gear. Make a totally separate network for that, I think. And I am like totally back up to my tricks. I had cleaned this room up a little bit in preparation for that rack showing up. And yeah, I'm back to my old tricks. This is the other rack, just totally covered in stuff. I've been sitting in here thinking about where I want to put this 3725. Got a light here, that might help a little bit. And I know I'm going to want another one of these power distribution units for sure right here. So I think I'm going to slap it right here. It's 2U, so it'll take up this whole thing. And then I need to get broadband above that. And the long story short, I'm probably going to redo this whole thing. You never know what you want until you try it, right? So I'm going to re-envision this, I'm sure, physically, the layout. So I'm just going to slap it right here because I know for sure I'm going to get more power distribution. I'm almost maxed out, actually, just what I have today. So let me throw it up here. I don't usually film myself racking this stuff up for obvious reasons, but this rack here set has a pretty interesting feature. The bottom of the hole that the bolt goes into to attach to the rack is open. It's like a little semicircle. So I think I'll have a bolt there, and I'll actually be able to lean this on it and then do the rest. I'll attempt to show you. So maybe you can see there, I've got the bolts started on the bottom where I want this thing, and it's pretty heavy. So we'll slot it in there, and I'm already failing. That's okay though. Oh yeah. And we'll try to get another one started. Holding it up with one hand. I'm gonna zip this down because it's pretty friggin' heavy. Okay. And yeah, that was not too bad. I'll do the other side. Got it tightened down and it's in there. I personally think you'd probably want something under here just for a little extra support on these rack ears, but I'll get something in there eventually. So now we're gonna hook it up. I'll give it power. I'll get it on the network. Probably as a little homework project for myself, I'm gonna get it on this network. This is configured on my home network 192.168.1, and this is a 10.0.0 network. And I'll just kind of relax and sit down and reconfigure that later off camera. It's kind of fun to do that stuff and mess around with networking when I'm not filming sometimes. So we'll get this on the network and get it plugged in and try to dial in. Oh, one important aspect. This Cisco 2500 series router is a terminal server. It's got 8 RJ45 serial console cables coming off of it so that I can control 8 devices over my network and not have to have a direct serial console to this. So I'll plug that in to this thing for sure. Got power and network in there on that thing, but now we need to deal with this. I was gonna make like a special mounting plate on the back and screw this in and stuff. But the truth is, I just don't know how I'm gonna configure stuff in there yet. So basically this is just gonna be like dangling off the back for now. But I still have the problem of getting phone lines from this room, which is about 20 feet away, into the other one through 2 walls. And for that, I've got a couple of these. These are Cat 6 cables that I've broken out into 4 pairs. And basically I can have this on one end of an RJ45 jack in here, breaking out the 4. I'll have this one over there. I've got like 20 lines going to that other room, and I'll be able to just plug these in to my 4 lines and have full access to this thing. I'm gonna wire all that up and then we'll power everything up and do one more test. Everything's as good as it's gonna get in here. Everything's ready. So let's power up all of this networking equipment, including this guy. I think the lights kind of blinked there. I have a power issue to address this year. The network is up, the router's up, everything is physically available, and I can access the one line we've been playing with right here on this port. I've ran a line to this with my little RJ45 breakout thing, and we're gonna try to run one more test with this, a new in-box Microcom FastPorte Fast, apparently after Compaq bought them. Totally shrink wrapped, ready for Y2K. This video is already ridiculously long, so I figured, you know, what's another 30 minutes of pain? Pretty sure it was DK in the Serial Port Discord who posted this, an eBay link, and I bought it. If there's stickers and stuff on plastic like this, I try to keep that, but it doesn't look like that's the case. So I'm just gonna take the plastic off because otherwise it's just slowly ruining the box. Let's get this off here. This thing looks like it was not cheap back in the day. It's pretty heavy. Let's try to do this without hurting anything here. Wow, full styrofoam. Check this out. Wow. Huge manual. Super thick, compact, product quality statement. Came with parallel cord. We'll use that for the computer we're gonna hook this up to. Very nice. Phone line. We'll use that just for good measure. There it is. The Desk Porte. Fast with NMP10. Sure the average consumer knew what that meant. I don't know what that means. Got a compact adapter. 16 volts AC. Pretty common for these older modems to use AC. Can I get this out without ruining anything? Barely. Look at that bad boy. Really nice. Little indicator screen, some LEDs. It's got these really nice rubber buttons. Wow. On the back, we've got a pass-through for like a printer, power, DTE, data terminal equipment, I think. Anyway, the computer, phone line coming in, and then a pass-through for your telephone. Speaking of telephones, let's make sure I actually have the line I think I have. Let's find a computer for this. It's not era appropriate with this modem by any stretch of the imagination, but we'll use this Pentium 4 Think Center running Windows XP. I think we'll be able to dial up with that. Turn this bad boy on, seems to be working. Reporting 33.6, it's max speed. I'm gonna hook everything up and we'll dial up. While this machine is booting up, I realized I had misspoke for sure. DTE is just serial. So you'd use like a DB25 to DB9 serial adapter. That is probably what I'll do. And this would actually be able to hook up the parallel port to the computer. So clarification there. Windows XP fired up here, and you go to phone and modem options. Over in modems, I had already configured standard 33K on COM1. I can't remember if I did that or Windows comes that way. Then you can go to diagnostics and query the modem. And it's actually talking. There we go, the desk porte. I don't actually know if you're supposed to say it that way. This is what the modem looks like when I perform that query. You can see the lights blinking away. I think this means we are ready to attempt to dial in on this different modem. Let's hit that. This thing better have a speaker. Oh, it does. Oh yeah. A real nice speaker. There's a little volume knob right here. Holy crap. Registering on the network, and we're connected at 14.4 kilobits per second. I bet that is the max that 8-port modem adapter can do, which kind of doesn't make it very useful for practical dial-up reasons. But man, a lot of the time back in the day, I was hitting 14.4, and that's the best I could get. Let's see, ping Google, the classic first test. We are online with a 400 millisecond ping time. Let's fire up Internet Explorer. Let's try, what is it? Frog. Yeah, Frog Find. There we go. We are online. Dialed up locally with my Homelab dial-up setup. This thing is swanky. It shows exactly the speed it's connected at right on the front. Bunch of indicators and information about the connection. This thing's pretty nice. I'm really excited to have the Dial-up ISP router box all in one unit, racked up in the rack, but the cable situation behind the scenes is getting pretty out of control. After I add a few more things, I'm gonna have to consider cable management and the networks that I actually want to design, so look forward to videos on that in the future. I've been on a little bit of a modem bent lately, but I think I've scratched the dial-up itch for now, and in some upcoming videos I'm gonna start covering something called Token Ring, a competitor to Ethernet. But in order to do that, I need some somewhat era-appropriate machines to get on the Ring network. And one of them is going to be this IBM Aptiva I've got kicking around, along with a couple other PCs. I've never turned any of them on, but I need to get them revived. This one's got the infamous Hitachi Death Star inside. So a little bit of mid-90s PC restoration work will be part of this whole Token Ring series. So if you haven't subscribed, please do so. I've got more videos on the way. And if you'd really like to support the channel, I'm on Patreon. I post behind-the-scenes type videos, sometimes little small follow-ups to mistakes or issues I was having in the public channel videos, and that sort of thing. I hope you enjoyed following along as we dove into the Cisco 3725, along with the modem and that HDA card. Had a good time. It was a great excuse to use an RJ21 cable, so I'm pretty satisfied with that, and I hope I see you in the next video.